The sun scorched the horizon until the sky looked like molten copper. Corporal James Adler squinted through the dust swirling across the desert plain, his uniform clinging to sweat and sand. He had been stationed in North Africa for 6 months, yet the desert still felt like another planet, silent, endless, and cruel. Ahead of him, British tanks crawled like beasts across the dunes, their metal bellies shimmering in the heat. The Battle of El Alamein was approaching, a confrontation that could decide the fate of the entire campaign. But for the men on the ground, victory wasn't the goal. Survival was. James ran his fingers across a small photo in his pocket, his wife, Emily, smiling by the sea back home. The sand stung his eyes, but he wasn't sure if it was the wind or the memory that hurt more. Night fell without warning. The stars appeared sharp as glass, the desert turning cold and ghostly. James and his squad dug shallow trenches, the distant hum of German engines echoing across the horizon. In the quiet, he whispered, "Tomorrow it begins." The first light of dawn brought thunder. Artillery shells screamed across the desert, bursting into pillars of smoke and fire. James ducked behind the wreckage of a truck as sand and metal rained around him. The ground trembled. El Alamein had awakened. Machine guns rattled in the distance. The sky darkened under the haze of explosions. James shouted orders to his men, his voice drowned by chaos. A shell landed nearby, throwing him backward. For a moment, all sound vanished. Only a ringing echo filled his skull. When he came to, the world was red and gray. His squad was scattered. He saw Private Owens trying to crawl through the sand, one leg gone. James dragged him behind a dune, whispering, "Hold on, we'll get you out." But the medics were far away and the battle was closing in. A German panzer tank roared over the ridge, its cannon lowering toward them. James lifted his rifle, useless against the monster of steel. The tank fired, the blast swallowing the desert in fire. By nightfall, the battle had fragmented into isolated skirmishes. James found himself alone with 2 surviving men, wandering through the dunes under a pale moon. The radio was dead, supplies low, water nearly gone. Every direction looked the same, sand and silence. They followed the faint glow of a burning convoy, hopping to find survivors. Instead, they found wreckage, twisted metal, bodies half buried in sand. The smell of fuel and death clung to the air. James searched the ground and found a small leather journal beside a fallen German soldier. Flipping it open, he saw sketches of home, a farm, a family, a child's face drawn in pencil. He stared for a long moment before closing it. War didn't care for sides, only for lives it took. They camped beside the wreck that night, sharing a single canteen of warm water. "If we make it out," James whispered, "I'll never look at the desert the same again." The others nodded in silence. The next morning, the heat returned with vengeance. The horizon rippled with mirages, pools of water that vanished the closer they walked. Owens collapsed first, his lips cracked and eyes hollow. James tried to lift him, but his strength was fading too. Suddenly, distant figures appeared, soldiers waving from what looked like an oasis. Salvation, or another trick of the desert. James stumbled forward, shouting, but the air swallowed his voice. When he reached the spot, there was nothing, just wind and emptiness. He dropped to his knees, the sand burning through his palms. In his delirium, he saw Emily again, standing in the distance, smiling. "Come home," she said. He closed his eyes, clutching the photo from his pocket. He wasn't sure if the tears were real or just the desert playing another cruel trick. Days later, a British rescue patrol found a group of men half buried in sand. Among them was James, alive but barely breathing. In his pocket, they found 2 things: a photograph of a woman by the sea and a German soldier's journal, its last page stained with sand and blood. Weeks later, James awoke in a field hospital. The nurse smiled faintly. "You're lucky to be alive." But he didn't feel lucky. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, golden and silent. He wrote a letter home. The desert took everything but gave me one truth. The men we call enemies were just as lost as we were. Out here, the sand doesn't care who you fight for. When he finally left the front, James carried the journal with him. It was his reminder that even in the heart of war, humanity refused to die.